Welcome, dear students, to the lesson on Amitabh Ghosh's works and their relation to climate change. We have been discussing some of his major works, and let's go to his major themes now. Amitabh Ghosh's work on climate change explores several interconnected themes, each illuminating different facets of the ecological crisis. His novels and essays tackle the complex relationship between human societies and natural ecosystems, how historical forces like colonialism have intensified environmental issues, and how migration and displacement are increasingly linked to climate change. By incorporating spiritual and cultural narratives, Ghosh's works also highlight the importance of traditional knowledge in understanding and addressing ecological challenges. So we decided last time that we would explore the various themes about the interconnection between humanity and the ecosystems as they are found in Ghosh's works. The Sundarbans is an important theme. In fact, it is a living character in Ghosh's works, and it is rich in its fauna and flora, rich in its cultural diversity. So he treats it almost like a character with its tides, flora and fauna, playing active roles in the lives of the people who live there. And it is also a precarious ecosystem because it is shaped and reshaped by the tidal changes and by natural disasters like cyclones. It is a land that continuously sinks and rises. So he sees the metaphor of impermanence. He sees the metaphor of impermanence in the Sundarbans. He quotes a very important German poet when he talks about the impermanence of, when he talks about the unstable or the impermanent condition of the Sundarbans. So the people inhabiting this region adapt their lives to the rhythms of nature, acknowledging that their survival depends on respecting these natural patterns. So we already know that there are many endangered species of herbs, plants and animals in the Sundarbans, especially the tigers. So it's like it is dependent on the sea for its survival, and any rise in sea levels causes havoc. That's why the land is continuously rising and sinking. Another important work which deals with the Sundarbans as metaphoric, as legendary, as symbolic is the Jungle Nama. The Jungle Nama is a thin book of poetry. Everything is in verse. It is a whole story about Bon Bibi, who is the goddess of the Sundarbans, and it is the folk belief and the faith in her that this story celebrates. It celebrates her power. It also celebrates the power of indigenous beliefs, indigenous rituals. So it is about the demon Dokkin Rai and the poor orphan boy Dukhe. So he has a symbolic name Dukhe because he is very miserable, too poor even to afford 3 meals a day. He lives with his widowed mother, and this uncle of his, he has an idea. There's an uncle who is quite prosperous, who has ships and who has a business. He thinks that he will take this boy along with him and he assures the mother that he will take care of the boy. When the mother hears that he's going to take the boy to the Sundarbans, she is very concerned. She also knows that the brother-in-law or the child's uncle is a very crafty and a very cunning fellow. So she fears for her son, and but he promises that he will take care of the boy. But when this man, he goes to the Sundarbans, he's awed by the landscape. There's a certain kind of magic about it, and there's Dakin Rai who has been starving for human flesh for so many days. When he sees these sailors landing, he creates this illusion of honeybee hives and fruits and all that illusion, and then he makes it go away, and then he kind of traps the uncle, and he says, if you want a booty of all this forest products, then there is something I want from you. So when he tells him that he wants the young orphan boy, then the uncle gets concerned. He says, I have made a promise. He says, then you will not escape with your life. So this man who was blinded by greed is trapped by Dakin Rai, and he has to surrender Dukhe to the demon. But as we have in ancient societies and in indigenous systems, indigenous tribes, that oral stories go like songs, and so there's a poem that is sung as a song, and that has been learnt up by the child. That is a prayer that the mother has taught the boy, that if in danger you must say this prayer the right way, so Bon Bibi will help you. So the boy knows that he is trapped and he is at the mercy of the demon. When he sings and he prays that prayer, then Bon Bibi comes to his rescue. There are several climate issues in Jungle Nama. It deals with the gap between the poor and the rich, as Dukhe is extremely poor and his uncle is very rich. It also deals with human greed for forest wealth, which is looted without any conscience. So here it's a case of honey that is going to be robbed from the forest. There is a strong spiritual element in this story, as a goddess comes in response to Dukhe's prayers taught to him by his mother. And this story deals with the spiritual and cultural values of these indigenous cultures. So the beauty of this book is that it brings the spirit and the essence of a certain culture. And in this culture, there is a blending of different religions. It's not Hinduism alone. It doesn't belong to any one religion, because the language that is used in this text, some of it is Urdu. They are greeting each other and saying salam. So it's a mixed, diverse kind of place, and in reality too, Bon Bibi is revered by both Hindus and Muslims alike. So when I think about this issue of secularism, of this collective unity and collective effort to conserve the environment, then I am reminded of other philosophies and other philosophical systems related to climate change, which talk about collective action, and they talk about diversity of cultures that should be maintained in order to maintain and preserve environment. Because all religious beliefs, all cultural beliefs have their own way of looking at the environment, have their own way of preserving it. So accepting diversity is very important, and that is one thing in this book, Jungle Nama, which is, as I said, poetry and with nice sketches also. It's a very interesting book. The theme of human vulnerability and resilience. In The Hungry Tide, characters like Piyali Rao and Fokir, who come from vastly different cultural backgrounds, experience nature in contrasting ways. So Piyali has come from outside and Fokir belongs to India, to West Bengal. Piyali, an Indian American marine biologist, views the Sundarbans scientifically, whereas Fokir, a local fisherman, has an intuitive understanding of the tides and animal behaviors. So we can see in this novel, there's a contrast between indigenous belief and culture related to environment and the one that is scientific and technological knowledge related to the environment. Through their interactions, Ghosh highlights the diverse ways humans relate to nature and how this interconnectedness can foster both vulnerability and resilience. So, it can be vulnerable also and it can be resilient also. So, it's the way that technology is used, it's the way that science is employed to save the environment, which can help make the environment resilient, or it can be used to exploit the environment and make it vulnerable and create a loss in biodiversity. Then there are other themes, conservation versus livelihood. Now this is a very important theme. Sometimes they come in conflict with each other. For example, if one talks about fishermen out there on the coast, their life depends on fishing, and then the government has policies about conservation in which they are not allowed to fish in certain areas. So their livelihood gets affected by this. So certain ethical questions are raised that drastic changes, policies without considering the needs and the situations of people living in that area or in that environment, that brings a lot of trouble. Ghosh also raises ethical questions about conservation efforts. While conservation initiatives aim to protect endangered species of the Sundarbans, they often do so at the cost of local livelihoods, forcing people to choose between environmental protection and their means of survival. So, we know that the sea is a resource for a lot of things, for all kinds of herbs and minerals and fish, and there are kind of whole variety of fish, and then there are the shells and the stones and precious stones and all that are there. So when they are told not to fish for a certain species of fish which is endangered, it becomes a problem, because often their livelihood depends on that. So it becomes a very difficult question or very challenging thing to conserve species when people's livelihood depends on them. So this tension reflects broader conflicts in environmental policies worldwide, where the interests of communities and conservationists do not always align harmoniously. So we know that seafood is eaten widely, but many varieties and many species of marine life are endangered species. So, and while they are endangered, or the reason for their being endangered is the vast demand in the market. So, this is what helps these fishermen to sort of earn their livelihood, and then they are told that they are limited and they are not permitted to catch this species, then it creates problems. So I should say the same thing about this crop of mushrooms. They are mushrooms that are extremely expensive in the international market. They are exorbitant, and they are people whose livelihoods in these areas, these dense forests, depend on these mushrooms. And when the idea of conserving these lands or forests comes, then there is a problem, because there are people who are dependent on the fruit of the trees or these mushrooms or herbs, which are not found elsewhere and which are very expensive worldwide. So this kind of tension is there, and Ghosh deals with these ethical issues in his novels. Colonialism and climate. So colonialism is a part of many of his novels, and climate impact is connected with it somewhere directly, and in some novels indirectly. So there are sub-themes of extraction and exploitation. Colonialism introduced exploitative agricultural practices, deforestation and mining activities that have long-lasting effects on ecosystems. So it was colonialism that introduced agricultural practices that ruined the ecosystem, and it had long-lasting effects on the ecosystem. So climate change is linked with colonialism. The Great Derangement. Ghosh discusses how the British drained wetlands in India to promote agriculture, disrupting natural flood cycles and increasing vulnerability to floods. Global inequity in climate impact. Through this critique, Ghosh points out that climate change is not merely a scientific or ecological issue, but also a legacy of historical injustices that have left certain regions more vulnerable. So it is the idea of historical injustices, how the wealth, both raw material and the natural wealth of the colonized countries was looted and drained to set up the great empires of the colonizers, like the British Empire or the French Empire. And so it was injustice that whereas these countries were left in poverty and with disturbed climate cycles and inequality in society, the affluent countries became richer with all the things that were taken from them. So it is a legacy of historical injustices. And closely connected to it is the idea of climate debt. In discussing colonialism's environmental impacts, Ghosh touches on the concept of climate debt, the notion that industrialized nations owe a debt to developing nations for their disproportionate role in causing climate change. So, as we already know that the affluent nations to some degree can withstand extreme climate events because of a better economic system, because of more wealth and affluence. But the same climate change impacts felt elsewhere cannot be dealt in the same manner. They create political, economic, emotional, psychological trauma in such countries. So there's a debt that these industrialized nations owe to the developing nations. As we already discussed, that one of the major outcomes of climate crisis are migration and displacement. Very early on, in one of the early lessons, we saw a video in which there was somebody from Africa, a climate activist, and she was telling us how there are parts of Africa where there is drought or where there is famine and people are forced to migrate to other places which become overcrowded, and when those places suffer then they move on to other places. So this is what happens, and climate change creates a layered effect, and migration and displacement is one of the very serious concerns related to extreme climate events. And Ghosh doesn't forget to address these themes, and particularly in Gun Island, which explores how climate change is driving people from their homelands. Climate-induced migration. In Gun Island, Ghosh portrays characters who are forced to migrate due to rising sea levels, natural disasters, and resource scarcity. Blurring myth and reality. The protagonist in Gun Island, Deena Datta, encounters the legend of Bonduki Saudagar, a gun merchant who journeys across continents in search of safety. This myth mirrors the plight of present-day migrants who traverse dangerous paths in search of refuge. And we know that in today's world, this migration is a traumatic journey. Many lives are lost when people try to migrate to other countries, sometimes by sea, sometimes illegally, and they are not received well by other countries because they are already facing a large influx of migrants, or they face a lot of swindlers and toots on the way, and many of them lose their lives crossing seas illegally in boats and all that are unsafe for them, which are sometimes overloaded with people. So this novel, Gun Island, it talks about this painful trauma of migration, which is a dangerous path in search of refuge. The role of borders in an ecological crisis. Through his exploration of migration, Ghosh critiques rigid national borders and immigration policies that fail to address the realities of climate-induced movement. Migration can be a traumatic journey, and there are so many issues related with that too, like immigration policies and national borders and all other necessities, legal requirements for the journey, and people who kind of want to earn money by cheating these people. So Ghosh critiques these policies, these immigration policies, that make the already traumatic journey of migrants even more traumatic and more uncertain. Spiritual and cultural narratives. So we already discussed Sundarbans, Bon Bibi, the power of mythology and folklore. In Gun Island, Ghosh uses the Bengali legend of Bonduki Saudagar as a metaphor for humanity's struggle with forces beyond its control. So we have some images and recurring metaphors also related to mythology and folklore in Ghosh's work. So we have this symbol of Banduki Saudagar. Traditional knowledge systems. Ghosh's work often highlights the wisdom of indigenous and rural communities who possess a deep understanding of their ecosystems. For example, Fakir in The Hungry Tide embodies an intuitive connection to the tides and natural rhythms of the Sundarbans. Cultural interpretations of nature. By presenting cultural narratives, Ghosh emphasizes that nature is not just a resource to be exploited, but a living entity with its own agency. Dukhe in Jungle Nama is spiritually connected to Bon Bibi and can read the workings of his wicked uncle's mind. So there's a spiritual connection of Dukhe to Bon Bibi, and it emerges when he reads out that prayer and she appears on his side to save his life. So the spiritual and cultural side of Indian ethos is explored in many of Ghosh's novels, and he talks about cultural diversity too, and he talks about his culture in West Bengal. His language uses those cultural terms, and which are used in society, which are used in families. So his works have a lot about spirituality and culture. Representation of climate change in fiction versus non-fiction in Ghosh's work. Ghosh's body of work skillfully navigates between fiction and non-fiction to address climate change from multiple angles. So he has written fiction as well as non-fiction to deal with the issues of climate change, and he looks at it from a variety of perspectives. Now, for example, Gun Island. It engages readers with personal and imaginative narratives that illuminate the impacts of climate change on individuals and communities, offering an emotional and experiential understanding. So, the power of personal narrative is there, and through that, Ghosh represents climate change in Gun Island, and by presenting this emotional side, he humanizes the issues of climate change. We learn a lot about such issues from Fakir and about his connections with other folk who live on the coast. Fakir teaches a lot to Piali. In contrast, his non-fiction like The Great Derangement provides a more direct critique of societal and literary failures to address climate change, challenging readers to rethink their perceptions of literature, history and environmental responsibility. So, non-fiction works like The Great Derangement, they deal with climate change directly and critiquing systems, policies, writers, etc. For not taking note of climate change, for not addressing climate change issues in their work. So, thus he enlightens his readers with his perceptions on literature, history and environmental responsibility, and that is something that gives great depth to his work. He uses myth and folklore very effectively, and many of his novels are based in the colonial past, and the story emerges as an outcome of all the injustices in that colonial past. So, even if we deal with the present, we do travel and look at the injustices of the colonial past. In one of the books of the Ibis trilogy, he talks about indentured labor which are called the Girmitiyas. These people were hired in and taken in ships abroad to work for the colonizers in various different places. So the abuse and the exploitation of these people is shown in this series. So I'll stop here and I'll continue next in the next lesson. I hope you got a good idea of the themes that Ghosh's work deals with. Thank you.